Hey guys, it's Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense. Let's continue our series called Labs. In previous videos, we have talked about sputum sampling, lactoferrin, lactate dehydrogenase, lactic acid, etc. Today, it's time to talk about serum osmolality. What's the normal serum osmolality? About 290 milliosmoles per kilogram of water. This is my series called Labs, and today's video is video number 19. Please watch these videos in order. Clinically speaking, we can measure osmolality of three fluids: the blood osmolality, the urine osmolality, and the stool osmolality. This is an area of medicine where most doctors are lacking. Lacking is a polite word. Doofuses is a more accurate description. Even the highly specialized disciplines such as emergency doctors or freaking nephrologists can grasp blood osmolality and urine osmolality, but they are clueless about the stool osmolality. Conversely, a flipping gastroenterologist might know stool osmolality, but he doesn't give a rip about blood or urine osmolality. A physician who can make sense of all of them and interpret them clinically in real patients is a unicorn. So we have three types of osmolality: blood, urine, and stool. And we have four types of gaps. We have the serum anion gap, the urine anion gap, the serum osmolar gap, and the stool osmolar gap. Oh, by the way, here is a bombshell. The gap doesn't really exist. It's a gap in our knowledge, a gap in our measurement. So how do I measure serum osmolality? First, you get some blood from the patient, usually from a vein. Put that blood in a red top tube and send it to the lab. The lab has a great device known as the osmometer. The osmometer will measure the osmolality or the osmolarity of the freaking blood, and it will give you a number. The normal is about 290. Why do I care? Let me explain, Nick. Here is your cell. Whatever is inside is called the intracellular fluid, okay? And here's the interstitial fluid, and here is the blood, or the plasma. Okay, this is ICF. Those combined are called ECF. Let's say that the water is flowing from the blood and into the cell. What's going to happen to the cell? Oh, it's going to swell. What if the opposite is happening? What if water is leaving the cell, called water efflux? Oh, the cell is going to shrink. Exactly. Why should I give a hoot? Imagine that this cell is your neuron, a cell in your brain, okay? If it swells or shrinks, either way you can go crazy, and I mean this technically. You can suffer from confusion, delirium, disorientation, drowsiness, loss of consciousness, seizures, coma, and even death, and this is just off the top of my head. What if you have more sodium inside the cell than outside? Oh, you will get water influx. Yeah, because water follows sodium. #osmosis. Oh, so the cell is gonna swell. Make believe that this cell is in your brain and you'll get mental status abnormalities. Conversely, if there is more sodium in the extracellular fluid than in the intracellular fluid, then you will have water efflux. Water is gonna leave the cell, and when it leaves the cell, your cell is gonna shrink. Make believe that this cell is a neuron in your brain, and you get mental status abnormalities. And that's why we measure the serum or blood osmolality, because it provides you with many clues on the patient's status. What is the normal blood osmolality again? About 290 milliosmoles per liter or milliosmoles per kilogram of water. It doesn't matter because you know the density of water is 1, so you can say per liter, per kilogram. Clinically, I don't give a rip. That's the normal. Okay, what if the patient's serum osmolality is greater than 385? The patient will start suffering from stupor. Oh, mental status abnormalities. What if the serum osmolality is between 400 and 420? Oh, the patient can have seizures. What if it's greater than 420? Coma and maybe death. Let me remind you of osmosis. Osmosis is a special type of passive simple diffusion. There is no energy needed, no carrier needed. It happens along the electrochemical gradient from a higher concentration of water to low concentration of water, or from low concentration of sodium to a high concentration of sodium. Osmosis, simple diffusion of water, needs no energy, needs no carrier. We have talked about the osmotic pressure before in my playlist on physiology and in my playlist called Fluids Electrolytes. Okay, does osmosis care about the size or the number of molecules? It cares more about the number. Let me explain. Here is 1 mole of glucose, okay? It will give you just 1 osmol. What's osmol? It's a osmosis caused by 1 mole. Oh, I get it. How about 1 mole of chloride? Oh, so this is Cl2. So Cl and Cl. It will give you 2 osmoles. But hey, medicosis, glucose is heavier and has a greater mass than chloride. Osmosis doesn't care. Osmosis cares about the number. These are 2, this is 1. I will have more osmolality here than here. And that's why the osmotic pressure is directly proportional to the number of particles. Not the size, who cares about the size? The number of particles over the volume. And that's why, what's the normal serum osmolality? 290. 290 of what? Number, baby. Milliosmoles over volume, liter. Or you can say milliosmoles per kilogram of water because the density of water is 1. And what is density? Mass over volume. If I give you a bottle of water that is 1 liter, it will weigh 1 kilogram. And that's why, clinically speaking, there is no difference between osmolality and osmolarity. These are minutiae that only your woke professor care about, but in the real world with real patients, no one cares. Question: which blood vessel of the following has the highest serum osmolality? Please pause. And the answer here is whichever blood vessel has the greatest number of particles. Look at this. It has the greatest number of... But hey, medicosis, if I compare between D and E, I see here glucose and glucose. Okay, I get it. Glucose and calcium chloride. I thought that they have equal osmolality. Doofus. What did I say 5 seconds ago? We care about the number, not the mass, not the size, the number. The glucose is 1 molecule, but calcium chloride, here is 1, 2, 3. You have 3 molecules here. So of course, blood vessel E has the highest osmolality or osmolarity of all of them. Osmolality versus osmolarity. Not that I care, but if you want to memorize it, okay, osmolarity is per liter. So osmolality is per kilogram of water. Osmolarity is per liter of water. The great thing about this mnemonic is that it works across cultures. So let's recap. Osmolality per kilogram, osmolarity per liter. Which one is more accurate? Osmolality per kilogram? Yes. Why? Because if I change the temperature, I will change the volume, but the mass will not change. Let me explain. I will give you a bottle of water that has 1 liter of water, which is 1 kilogram of water. If you heat it, the volume will expand. So it's going to be 1.01 liter or something. But the mass or the weight of the bottle is not going to change when you heat it. That's why osmolality is more accurate. But which one is more practical in real life with real patients? Osmolarity. Why? Because anything in the lab or in the hospital is graduated. You can say, oh, this is half a liter, this is 1 liter. So per liter is easier than per kilogram. Per kilogram, you gotta go find a scale while the patient is in coma. And here's the classic dad jokes. What do we call a test tube that has finished its education? A graduated cylinder. Clinically, we don't care about the difference between osmolality and osmolarity. You can use them interchangeably. No one cares. There is a huge difference between dehydration and extracellular fluid volume depletion. By the same token, there is a difference between overhydration and extracellular fluid volume overload. Let me explain. Dehydration is when you lose water alone. Volume depletion is when you lose salt and water. This is what we call hypovolemia. It drives me nuts when pediatricians say, oh, the baby has been vomiting, the baby is dehydrated. Shut up, the baby is volume depleted. The baby has lost salt and water. Because if you believe that the baby is just dehydrated, you will give the baby what he lost, just water. And you'll probably kill the baby because the baby had volume depletion. The baby needed salt and water. And that's why we give water with electrolytes. And this is the idea behind Pedialyte. Conversely, if you believe that overhydration is synonymous with volume overload, you are as naive as the B lymphocyte before it recognized the antigen. The difference between osmolality and tonicity is important. What's osmolality? You collect some blood, send it to the lab, put it in the freaking osmometer, it's gonna give you a number. What's that number? What's that 290? What does that mean? It means the number of osmoles in that volume of blood. This is osmolality. Tonicity, however, is not just osmolality, this is the effective osmolality. What does that mean? It only cares about those molecules who do not cross cell membranes. The molecule needs to stay in one compartment, whether inside or outside the cell, so that it can exert an osmotic pressure. However, an ineffective osmol will just keep going into the cell and out of the cell, into the cell and out of the cell. This cannot contribute to tonicity. So if you get a patient who is isotonic and add urea to it, urea is not effective. What's going to happen to his tonicity? It's not going to change. Urea is not an effective osmol. Urea will contribute to your osmolality, but urea will not contribute to your tonicity because it's an ineffective osmol. Why? Because it keeps dancing around, in and out, in and out. Quiz time! Alright, please calculate the osmolality of the solution in each case, then write the answer in the adjacent space. So, some people say, oh, actually, medicosis, this is per liter, so it should be osmolarity. Okay, Rick, no one cares. Let me know the answer to these questions in the comment section. Okay, medicosis, I got you. Osmolality is just everything. We are counting any osmol inside the blood, whether it's glucose, urea, sodium, potassium, everything. That's true. Tonicity only counts the effective osmols. Perfect. Can you give me an example of an osmol that is not effective? Yeah, urea. Urea is BS, literally. It is not an effective osmol. It does not contribute to tonicity. Example, imagine that you have a patient who has normal plasma osmolality, which is 290, okay? And we added some urea to this patient. You know what's going to happen to his tonicity? Nothing. What's going to happen to his cells? Are they going to swell? Are they going to shrink? Neither. Okay, guys, there is a difference between measured osmolality and calculated osmolality. Measured, you do it in the lab by the freaking osmometer. Calculated, you calculate using your brain via this equation. It has sodium, it has glucose, it has BUN, which is urea. Urea is an osmol. If I have tons of urea in my blood, I will have increased plasma osmolality. However, it is not an effective osmol. It's not gonna change my tonicity. And this is a famous mistake among students and doctors. Urea is not effective. Urea cannot contribute to your tonicity. Urea cannot make your cell swell or shrink. I have swollen or shrunk because of urea, said no cell ever. How about glucose? No, glucose is doozy. It is an effective osmol. So which one is more powerful as an osmol, glucose or sodium? Well, actually, sodium in your body. You know why? Because sodium is everywhere. That's why your tubules in the kidney, whether proximal tubule, loop of Henle, distal tubule, are always dealing with sodium because it's abundant. It's the most abundant ion in the ECF, and the ECF is the internal environment of your body. That's why, let's say I have a diabetic ketoacidosis, tons of glucose in my blood. Glucose now is significant because you have too much of it. It's gonna lead to hypertonicity, ICF contraction, and the cell is gonna shrink. Make believe that this cell is in your brain. You will suffer from coma. That's why we call it diabetic ketoacidotic coma or hyperosmolar hyperglycemic non-ketotic syndrome. So the main cause of increased plasma osmolality is usually hyperglycemia, too much glucose, or hypernatremia, too much sodium. What's the normal plasma tonicity? Same as the plasma osmolality, 290. Okay, greater than 295, we call it hypertonic. Less than 275, we call it hypotonic. Some people say 295, 300. Who cares? What are those effective osmols? Solutes that are confined to the ECF and cannot cross through the lipid bilayer membrane. They are capable of exerting an osmotic pressure and making or forming an osmotic gradient. Can you give me examples of those effective osmols that contribute to osmolality and tonicity? Sure. Normally, sodium and glucose. And abnormally, sorbitol and mannitol. How about ineffective urea? Urea is a piece of melana. Okay, medicosis. So my patient is hyperosmotic. I got you. And my patient is also hypertonic. How do I tell if this is a normal substance or a foreign substance? This is the story of the serum osmolar gap, which is the difference between the measured osmolality and the calculated osmolality. Measured minus calculated equals the gap. What is measured osmolality? Send the blood to the lab. The osmometer will give you a number, let's say 290. What is calculated? Use your brain. Use this equation. The calculated osmolality equals 2 times sodium. Why 2 times sodium? Because usually sodium is bound to something else, like chloride. Oh, I got you. And then glucose over 18, let's make it 20 to just keep it simple and easy to calculate, and BUN over 3. So these are the main osmols in your body. I did not say these are the main effective osmols. Urea is not effective. Got you, medicosis. If my osmolality is 290 in the blood, what's going to be my osmolality in the ICF? It has to be 290. Otherwise, your cells will swell or shrink until they burst. Osmolality of the plasma is the same as osmolality of the interstitium, is the same as osmolality of the ICF. They should equal 290 in normal people. Some mnemonics, these are jokes, don't take them seriously. These lab technicians are mediocre, I'm joking, okay? They just measure the osmolality using the osmometer. This is your measured osmolality. But I am a competent clinician. I calculate the osmolality using my cerebral hemisphere, depending on the sodium as my major cation. The calculated osmolality includes three things: sodium, the main extracellular fluid cation, glucose, the main source of energy, and BUN, the main source of bleep. So what is the osmolar gap? It's the difference between the measured and the calculated osmolality. What's the normal value? It should be less than 10. The gap should be less than 10. But what if the measured exceeds the calculated by greater than 10? Houston, we have a problem. There is a Trojan horse, a foreign substance that has invaded your body. Here is another question for you. I want you to tell me what's the measured osmolality, what's the calculated osmolality, and what's the osmolar gap? Let me know the answer in the comment section and tell me, what did you deduce from this osmolar gap? Does this patient have a Trojan horse inside his or her body or not? So the osmolar gap is measured minus calculated osmolality. Normally it should be less than 10. If it's greater than 10, Houston, we have a problem. There is a Trojan horse in the patient's body. What kind of Trojan horse? Could be methanol, ethanol, isopropanol, ethylene glycol, propylene glycol, keto acid, sorbitol, mannitol, glycerol. Osmolar gap less than 10, normal. Osmolar gap greater than 10, could be methanol, ethanol, could be any of these. If it's greater than 25, this is toxic alcohol. I did not say just alcohol. Toxic alcohol. What do you mean? Ethanol? No, ethanol is your regular alcohol. Toxic alcohol, baby. Methanol, ethylene glycol, propylene glycol, isopropanol. Hey, medicosis, help me. My patient's osmolar gap is greater than 25. I suspect toxic alcohol poisoning. What should I do? Any emergency situation, remember your ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation, ventilation, IV fluid, vasopressors. A patient came to you. You suspected that the patient is intoxicated with a certain substance. What should you do? You should get the osmolality and the osmolar gap calculated. Greater than 10, there is a Trojan horse inside. These are different substances and their effect on the anion gap and the osmolar gap. And this was clearly demonstrated in my Acidbase course on my website, medicosisperfectionalis.com. Okay, medicosis, what if I have hyperosmolality and hypertonicity? Oh, you have too much electrolytes in your blood. Yeah, you can have too much sodium, too much glucose. Yeah, that's not good. So what should I do? My blood is so concentrated. You should dilute it. You will be thirsty. Therefore, you will drink more water to dilute your blood and back to normal tonicity. Whenever you have hypertonicity, you will stimulate the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus to synthesize ADH or vasopressin, goes to the pituitary, gets released from the pituitary into the blood, and hypertonicity will also make you thirsty, and the ADH will do what? Reabsorb water in the nephron and constrict your blood vessels. Why does it vasoconstrict blood vessels? Oh, in order not to lose water in the urine, and also to try to increase your blood pressure. ADH has three receptors, V1, V2, and V3. Why do we call them V? Because it's also known as vasopressin. What's the function of V1? V1 will constrict your blood vessel to prevent hypotension and to prevent water loss in the kidney. Because if there is less fluid going to the kidney, there will be less fluid lost from the kidney. Duh. How about V2? V2 receptor will open aquaporin 2 channels to reabsorb water back into the circulation to ameliorate and alleviate the hypertonicity. ADH has many names. You can call it ADH or antidiuretic hormone or arginine vasopressin or just vasopressin or AVP or DDAVP or AVPR. I can give it to you as a medication called Desmopressin, which is similar to vasopressin. What does ADH do to the kidney? It binds to V2 receptors in the collecting tubules and then will open aquaporin 2 channels to reabsorb water to counteract the hypertonicity or the hypotension. Is this water following sodium? Shut up. It is not. This is pure, free water. We have two types of water, obligated water and free water. What is obligated water? It's obligated to follow electrolytes. It follows sodium, it follows chloride, it follows glucose. And this is aquaporin 1 channel, and the hormone that helps absorbs this is aldosterone. On the other hand, free water It does not follow electrolytes. It has the V2 receptor and aquaporin 2 channels, and it's influenced by ADH. Free to live, free to choose, which is a book by Milton Friedman. Medicosis, help me. I have hypertonicity. Oh, you will stimulate your osmoreceptors to make you thirsty and to increase ADH. The kidney will retain water and your tonicity will go down and back to normal. Conversely, if you have hypotonicity, the opposite will happen. When your kidney retains water in your blood, your urine osmolality will be greater than the plasma osmolality because now your plasma is relatively diluted and your urine is relatively concentrated. Is there a drug to inhibit ADH? Yes, it's called tolvaptan. Why should I use this? You can use it in a patient who has a syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion or SIADH. My patient has hyperosmolality and hypertonicity. What's the main stimulant of thirst? Hypertonicity. What's the main stimulant of ADH? Hypertonicity. So therefore, I will expect that your patient is thirsty and has high ADH. Tunicity determines the cell hydration, which determines the cell size. Let me explain. Imagine that I have hypertonicity. What does that mean? Well, I have tons of electrolytes and osmoles in the blood. Could be sodium, could be glucose, could be whatever. Therefore, what's going to happen to the water? The water will shift to the outside of the cell called efflux. What's going to happen to the cell? The cell is going to shrink. So the tunicity determines the cell hydration, which determines the cell size. Make believe that this cell is in your brain and you will suffer from mental status abnormalities. Conversely, hypotonicity will lead to cell swelling. This is why measuring your blood osmolality is paramount. Your blood osmolality can be elevated in cases of dehydration. Can you tell me why? Yeah, because you lost pure water. Dehydration is just loss of water. Okay, when you lose water, what's going to happen? Your serum will seem more concentrated. Oh, which will elevate my serum osmolality. Exactly. Hypernatremia. Do you remember the calculated osmolality? Yeah, 2 times sodium. Sodium is the major ion in the ECF. So hypernatremia will increase my osmolality and tonicity. Hyperglycemia. Absolutely. Diabetic ketoacidosis, which has hyperglycemia. Hyperosmolar hyperglycemic non-ketotic syndrome, which has hyperglycemia. Azotemia, uremia, renal tubular, etc. All of these have increased urea, increased BUN, and some other stuff. Because now your kidney is toast. Your kidney cannot secrete electrolytes. Your electrolytes will pile up in your blood, raising your serum osmolality. Ketosis or ketoacidosis. What are those keto acids? You have the acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. All of these are osmoles that can raise your osmolality. Diabetes insipidus. Why? Because it leads to dehydration, and therefore your plasma is more concentrated. Mannitol, methanol, ethanol, ethylene glycol. Serum osmolality is low in cases of overhydration. Absolutely. I have too much water. My plasma is diluted. The serum osmolality is dropping like a rock. And syndrome of inappropriate ADH. Too much ADH in the system, too much absorption of free water. My plasma is very diluted, and this is a low serum osmolality. Let's review levels of consciousness, which is a descriptive guide for Glasgow Coma Scale from Mnemonics. Okay, these are the levels of consciousness. First, you are conscious. Great. Next, you're confused. Here is confuse. Then you become delirious. Here is the dollar. And then somnolent. Here is the salmon. And then obtunded. Obama tandem. Stuporous. Here is the stew purse. And last, you are comatose. The comma toes. For more animated medical mnemonics, go to picmonic.com/VIP-hookup/medicosis. Question of the day. You know that SIADH is a syndrome where the patient has tons of ADH in the blood. Okay, what can be the cause? Sometimes it's a paraneoplastic syndrome. What kind of cancer or in what organ can lead to SIADH? Is it liver cancer, kidney cancer, brain cancer, lymphoma, or what? If you want to learn more about the stool osmolar gap, the serum anion gap, etc., base excess, base deficit, and all of this crazy stuff, check out my acid-base imbalance course on my website, medicosisperfectionalis.com. If you want to learn about hyponatremia, hypernatremia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypochloremia, hyperchloremia, check out my electrolytes course on the same website. Use promo code SAVE30 to get a 30% discount for the next 11 students only. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and click on the join button. You can support me here or here. Go to my website to download my Acidbase course and my electrolytes course. Go to Mnemonic for great mnemonics, including a lovely mnemonic on how to actually calculate the Glasgow Coma Scale, one of the most confusing topics in medicine. Thank you. Until next time, be safe, stay happy, study hard. This is Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense.